Hard way to run a business, but I don't regret it.
It's not just the jack of all trades. It's getting super good at it, super efficient at it, and scaling that.
Stay focused and avoid the shiny objects. Do the work at the right time.
Man, I got to go all in on snow. This is going to change our business, and it did.
I wanted to be as good or better at being a dad than I did at wanting to have a business.
Best way to live a great life is get rid of negatives.
Build the people to solve the problems of your customers, and you've got a great business.
That is the nugget right there. Like we could just do a mic drop and all three of us could walk off the couch.
All right, welcome guys. I'm so excited to have you guys on here today. We've got Charlie the Young Gun. Charlie, can you introduce yourself? Just kind of tell us, your name, where you're from.
Yep. So Oakville, Ontario, where I'm from, 17 years old. We're doing design, build, maintenance, landscaping, and about $1 million a year right now. So
yeah. And the name of your business?
V.I.L Landscaping.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And Steve, the veteran.
Oh, thank you. My name's Steve Wheatcroft. Just kind of finished up my landscaping career, building a company. We got fairly substantial. Started in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, but ended up expanding across Canada. But super excited to be here with Charlie today. And I look at you and I'm like, oh man, I kind of see myself in you. And it's awesome to see young people involved in the industry. So this could be interesting today.
I really thought it would be cool to bring you both on. I mean, we had the good fortune of spending some time together this week, and I saw you guys kind of gravitate together just naturally. I thought it would be great for our audience to kind of get a piece of a discussion around what it's like to be coming into the industry and experiencing the success that you're experiencing so early, Charlie. It's just unheard of, honestly. For a 17-year-old to have $1 million company. It's so remarkable.
Thank you.
And Steve, you're so humble, but you built a $100 million plus landscape company. That's, as we all know, just about impossible. And you're kind of the extremes on both ends of on the spectrum. You being the young gun at the level you're at so soon, and you having recently retired from the industry, although I don't think you're done yet, far from it. So, and having had that success. And so I really wanted to ask you, Steve, if you were giving Charlie that one piece of advice, especially seeing that he's found so much success so quickly. You started your business super young. How old were you when you started?
Yeah, I was probably 22. We started it in my last year of university. So spent a lot of time going out into the bush and planting trees and working on seismic lines. And, I just kind of went, I want to stay around town this year. And so in my last year of university, we wrote a MBA level paper on how to, a company, and ours was, this great landscape company, and how we thought the industry was kind of immature and we could kind of clean it up. And hence we always had white trucks because it was kind of this white knight mentality and coming to the rescue of everybody to cut their grass. I think that's how it started off. So, that's kind of when I got going, 22, and I already had one kid on the way and another one I had another one 2 years later. So I don't know. I just, as you know, Mark, I'm probably a gulper of life. Sometimes it's gotten me into trouble, but, I just dove right in, and this is what I was going to do. Yeah.
Incredible. Charlie, what got you into business? Tell us this story. And how the hell did you get to $1 million at 17? This is I think every 17-year-old kid's dream. Although they'd like to dream about it, I don't think they could actually go out there and get it done, because that takes a hell of a lot of hard work. So tell us that story.
From a young age, enjoyed being outside, being outdoors, and that's how it started, just knocking on doors, pushing a lawnmower. And the first few years, it was just keep busy throughout the summer. The second, third year, COVID was getting started, and just spent my summers outside and enjoyed the learning. There was always something new, a bigger job, more complex, and surrounding myself with very experienced individuals like both you guys was almost addicting, just learning. And it was just a result of that, the success, I guess.
What made you decide to focus on learning that much about landscaping versus other things? I mean, lots of kids in high school have hobbies like video games or sports or, social clubs and whatnot. What put you in that place? I know that sounds like COVID was actually a bit of a gift in a way, because you probably had to do something other than some of those other things. But I think everybody went through COVID, but we don't see hundreds or any other 17-year-olds with $1 million business. So what made you focus on that during that period?
Like I mentioned, just I like being outside.
Yeah.
Number one was a big thing, but seeing a piece of paper and a few weeks later a backyard that has your name on it that you built, that was super cool to me, super special.
Yeah.
That was big. And then the business aspect. Sign up for I want to do business and all these business courses in high school or elementary school, and you look at the guy teaching it, you're like, what do you know? So just the real life experience I was learning way more, and that's what drove me to keep going.
Wow, that's amazing. Steve, what would you say to yourself if, like, knowing what you know now after an entire career? How many years in the industry?
Yeah, so this would have been my 35th year.
So 35 years.
Yeah, really foolish. It's stuck around for a long time. Charlie, it's bad. Like, you never get out.
What would you say to yourself if back to yourself starting the business? What's that one piece of advice that you would give that maybe would have made life a little easier in your first 5 years? I think that's a gift that only somebody like you can give to somebody like Charlie.
First of all, Charlie is amazing. Like, when I was 17, I think I had my first kind of real job working for somebody else. I went and worked seismic, and I ended up on a crew in the middle of nowhere, and I was the only guy that hadn't served time in prison. And here I am, 17, in the middle of, we were based out of Weyburn, Saskatchewan, and I remember that summer was about 40 degrees, and I'm with a bunch of different individuals, some from the Hells Angels, and we were working, and and to think that you're doing $1 million then. And I remember that summer because my friend said, I can't believe how much money you made. And I made $6,200, Charlie. So I don't know if I could give you a lot of advice, but I think you're kind of a quantum step ahead of where I was. And it's amazing. And you're not a normal 17-year-old, first of all. I've met lots of 17-year-olds, and you're not one of them. But I think one of the things, and Charlie, maybe you've done this already, but I was a little bit rammy, right? I was just like, I wanted to just get more trucks. I just wanted to grow. And I didn't, even though I had a business degree, the accounting and I liked finance, but the accounting part to me was the part about business I didn't really like. It just wasn't the fun part. Like, those are the people in the back room, those are the people that add up, or kind of, I kind of call accountants like super smart scorekeepers, right?
Yep.
But I think that, if I could have went back in time and when I was 22 and really looked at like more of a financial management approach to the business, I think, probably, wouldn't have taken me so long to get to a $100 million company. And I also think that, might have been a lot more profitable along the way. I mean, it worked out, and a lot of that was just through grit and determination. But it takes its toll on you. So I think, Charlie, I would say, and I think you're doing this already, is just, watch the numbers and make sure that you're making money, because there's nothing worse than making $1 and having to pay 10 cents for it.
Yeah.
Right.
That's such good advice.
Yeah.
Right. I do have a question for you, Steve.
Okay.
And you mentioned you're speaking quite a bit over the past few days, but it was quite a roller coaster at some point. You were having years, ups and downs, and there were some good years, some bad years. What flipped the switch for you to make it consistent, a consistent uphill, and stop the whole roller coaster effect? What changed when that happened?
Yeah, and you know what? I don't know if it ever did. Like some years were better than others. Now, we were very big into snow and ice management, so we were tied to some of the, the variables that come along with weather. So, we'd have some enormously big years for profit where it was like, ooh, that's fantastic. So I think that, really for me, and we took some big swings. Like, we were just talking yesterday to some guys about, how do you grow? And I said, well, one strategy is to go after a real big contract. And if you get it, you have to talk to your staff and like, this is all we're going to do. Because a lot of people go, oh, I'm 1.5 million and I got a $500,000 contract, and they think they should keep selling. Now your salespeople have to kind of morph into more of a, we're looking forward to maybe doing your contract next year. They're more of like a, an ambassador of the company as opposed to sales. And then your operations team has to swing in, and sometimes even the salespeople, and work together to make sure that you can deliver on that. So we had a lot of those kind of things where we had these quantum jumps in revenue, and they were hard and taxing to get under, control. But I think, your question about, when did it level off? Like when you keep growing to that size, leveling off happens when you kind of stop for a while and not smell the roses, but kind of let the tail catch up to the head. And, really that's probably one of my regrets. Like, maybe what would have happened if I would have stayed at 30 million? What would happen if I would have stayed at 20 million?
Yeah. And
then my talk yesterday, when I talked about where we were at 16 million, that was a fun time.
Yeah.
We were making money, we were a really tight group, although we were all the way through, but it felt more like kind of like a club. Like, we had, the parties were a little bit funner, and because everything wasn't so corpified, right?
Yeah.
So I think that, your answer, you're looking for the answer, but you probably not the guy to give it to you, right? Wow. Because I was like, let's just keep going and keep, like, I never swung a slow bat. You like, it's a home run or it's I'm out. So hard way to run a business, but I don't regret it. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, that's one thing I've noticed with people as they come to the end of their career is they either wish they would have moved a little faster or they wish they moved a little slower. And I notice that a lot as I talk to people. And I don't think there's a right and wrong. I think there's just what is. And along the way, you learn a lot of lessons. Charlie, you're moving fast, like and at $1 million of sales, you're sitting next to a veteran that's 100 million, but I'm seeing the same guy here.
100th of him.
Yeah, no,
it's okay, man.
I'm seeing the same guy here for sure. And as you think about the next 5 years, what have you learned from some of the conversations you've had with other business owners over the past 6 months to a year that you didn't know a year ago? I'm a big believer in seeking out mentors. My whole career, I was always finding the right person to talk to, somebody who has been where I want to go and maybe felt the pain that I don't want to feel. What are some things that you've learned from a few others?
A few things, like dialing in on really what you're going to offer. A huge part from you, but also hearing it from a lot of others. It's like, it opened my eyes to, it's not just the jack of all trades. It's getting super good at it, super efficient at it, and scaling that. Also, throughout this conference, there's a lot of really, really big companies. But I was talking to Matt from, is it Spring Eddy, or they won the award, and what he was saying was they're focused on their quality and staying at the size they're at, but continuing to offer that quality, and they won the award of highest revenue per hour, which is super, super impressive. But the only way that happens is dialing in and getting so good at only the one thing that you do. So that's been the biggest takeaway from the networking and talking to these mentors.
Yeah. And for me, if I were trying to tell myself the one thing, I started at 23, it would be that. It's incredible that you came out with that, because I try to share that as often as possible. It's like, get really good and help your staff get really good, and then stay focused and avoid the shiny objects. Because, throughout my career, whenever I started to veer off of what we were really good at, I felt the pain. And not only did I feel it, but my whole team felt it. And I always felt that was when culture went for a rough ride. More so than the growth stages in revenue. I certainly felt pain when we grew too fast. And for some of the reasons you were mentioning, Steve, you keep selling faster than you can build an operation. That certainly was painful. But whenever we got off of what we were really good at, it was like having a startup business again within the business.
Right.
And when you're a larger business and you've got 20 employees or 30 or 40 or 100 or 200, and you try to be innovative and get into some new businesses or new services, it's a startup without the innovation it coming through the owner, because there's too many other things to focus on. And so what ends up happening is you're relying on other people to be passionate enough to become the absolute best at something, and then help others become the best. And there's a magic in that's missing when there's not that owner that's just really pushing from within. And I think building culture and building teams that can be great is the leader's job. And if the leader doesn't know how to be great, I think it's really hard to continue scaling. And I love where you went with that, because
well, and listening to that, when you guys asked me, what I would have told my younger self, and I kind of said, well, I'm not 100% sure, but that is the nugget right there. Yeah. Like, we could just do a mic drop and all three of us could walk off the because I honestly think that, one of the things I remember in, it would have been around 2004, I went to my first SIMA event.
Yeah.
And it was like, they wanted me to come there and talk about this kind of innovative idea we had about selling out into the future liability protections. You kind of, doing site tours and stuff in the middle of winter. And I went there, and then they bumped me out from a speaker, and they said, oh no, we need this other guy to speak. He really wants to speak. I said, no problem, because I'd never been to a big event like this, just about snow. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And so I just sat in the back, and then I was like, and this was hard for me to say, but Steve, shut up. Don't talk to anybody and just absorb. And at the end of that, I went back, and I remember saying, man, I got to go all in on snow. This is going to change our business. And it did.
Yeah.
And at that point, 2004, and I look back, that would have probably been the time to say, we're not doing anything else. But I had this fear of, what am I going to do in the summer with staff? And you hear all the excuses. Yeah. You always hear the excuses of why not to do anything. But then I think now, I figured out all this other stuff that I was doing, and it was even crazier than the concept of being a snow only company.
Yes.
I actually did things that were way nuttier than that.
Yeah.
But if we would have dialed in there, and we wouldn't have had to probably even grow outside of our market, because, people think that, we're the snow mafia and that we did all the snow removal in Calgary. And it's so far from the truth. I think, somebody said, what do you guys do, 15%? I went, 15%. I think we do 0.1%.
Yeah.
So here we are, mining most of our revenue out of one city off of one service, and it was the most profitable. And then to have the inability in your own mind to say, why wouldn't I do more of what works?
Yeah.
Right? If you find something that's working, you keep doing it till it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
especially if you love it and you like the snow business.
I don't know. It's kind of really weird, because it's kind of really beats you up sometimes. But yeah. I mean, we had so many fantastic people, and we were all in it together. And, we thought, fighting storms, and we had this big, storm fighter mentality, and we had military jackets, and we got off on it.
Yeah. You made it fun.
And we did have a lot of fun, and it was nuts. And, I always thought, well, what are we going to do in the summer? But we would have figured that out.
Yeah.
We would have figured that out. And I know that for sure now. So,
Charlie, focus. It's such a powerful business tool.
Yeah.
Well, and I have a question for you, Mark. Guys wanting to get into that commercial snow game, and you can really capitalize and make money if you do it properly and line your sites up. But if you have sites on every corner of the city, you're not making any money because you're spending your whole night traveling. Step one's obviously LMN, but what's step two of getting your foot in the door?
Yeah, I think being focused in your sales process is a big one. First off, creating a sales process, and it doesn't need to be super complicated. I think sometimes people think of a sales process as being something that they have to work on for weeks, and I think it's something that you have to work on for an hour.
Right.
You get started with a sales process, and then you refine it over years. And so it's just something you're always getting better at. And early on, for me, it was the sales process was as simple as walking through the doors of every building on the street and actually just having a conversation and building relationships and just letting them know that I was interested in providing their snow service. And, I many customers that I did that with in my first, 3 to 5 years in business were still with me 20 years later, because you build those relationships. And then as you service them more and more, they don't shop around for snow. And this is something that I think a lot of people overlook. And they're trying to work through property managers, and they're trying to work through these big national accounts where they oftentimes aren't as relationship driven. And people are thinking, well, how do I get there? I think you get there by getting really good at building relationships every day. And eventually you get good at building those big national relationships too. And I think Steve, is all about relationships as well. And eventually those big national relationships come to you as a result of what you've got on each corner, within the city that you start in. And for me, I didn't ever break out of that. I just had a snow business in the Toronto market. And what we always focused on was getting more relationships in a tighter geographical area so that we didn't have to travel much, and so that we didn't have a lot of area to cover. And Steve was just talking about that. When you look around the city that you operate in, there's a lot of asphalt that needs to get plowed, or lots of grass that needs to be cut, whatever business you're in. And I think being really good at building relationships and reputation and building a brand in one market is a really powerful way to grow. And once you get really good at that, then building out a national, brand like what Steve did is possible. And I've never gotten to that point, but relationships, I think, are the key in those early years. And getting good at being a relationship builder, I think, it's one half of the business. There's two relationships that you need to be able to sort of master that are external, and there's one internal. So the relationship with yourself is most important. Once that one's under control, and you can build relationships with customers and build relationships with your employees, build the people to solve the problems of your customers, and you've got a great business. Right. And I think, like, when you focus on building relationships around some basic process, you can really move the needle and just continuously improve on the processes that support those relationships.
Yeah. And I think, to expand on what Mark said, I think that, I had my own way of selling, and it's different, and I've tried to explain it to people, and people that do it are quite successful. Young gun, you can steal my idea here. So I sold most of my snow in July, because you have to remember that the later you acquire that contract, the more chance you're going to fail. So it's snowing out. It's November 2nd. Somebody phones you up. I need you to come and assimilate my property into your portfolio. Well, you got to do a site tour. What are the damages? You can't see them now. They're under the snow. You've never had people walk the sites. You've already have your routing done. You've got everything maximized. And now you have to fit somebody in. So I would go out in July, and I would just drive around, and there's always billboards like this property management company, this, and take down the numbers. And then, I never tried to do a sales call. I would say, I just want to come and have a conversation, and I want you to talk to you about my company. I'm pretty sure you have somebody already. They're always, yeah. But, I want to come out and talk to you about why we're different, because one day your provider's going to screw up. And I want you to have my number there so that you can call me and I can come and bail you out. And they'd usually laugh at me. And then, they kind of were intrigued. And so it's like July. And they're like, why would you? Well, haven't you talked to your other snow providers? If they're not talking in July, how are they going to get ready to do everything? I said, we got to site stake your site. We come and do practice runs. We video your whole site. We lay it all out. We map it. We put it into our information books for the drivers. You mean they haven't been there yet? Well, now I get a chance to go have coffee with whoever managing 4 or 5 big properties. So I would talk to him, and the guy was sitting there waiting for the sales pitch. No sales pitch. And at the end, I'd get up and I'd go, here's my number. When the shit hits the fan, give me a ring, and we'll come and bail you out. I won't be there the next day. We'll wait till the snow, and then we'll do it. And then we'll figure out how we can do business together. And they would just laugh at me God, this guy's weird, and walk out the door. Wait till November, December, and I knew what those properties were. I'd drive by, and I'd be like, well, that guy's not going to call me. That guy's a pretty good snow removal guy. But then I'd write down, possible subcontractor for me, because I could see on these properties I was talking to who was getting good service. But really, Charlie, probably 50%, it was horrible. People hadn't shown up, and I just waited, and they phoned.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they phoned, there's 2 things. Now, I wasn't trying to get them to do me a favor and sell them something. I was the guy they were calling to bail them out of trouble. Their boss is yelling at them. They're going to get fired as a property management company. They've got a liability or lawsuit on their hands. So I went from sales guy to the saint, right? Like, hey, I'll come over there and help you out, like if I can fit you in.
Yeah.
So it was like a mental shift in how I sold. I kind of, I set myself up for the future. In the moment when people are selling, we always had a lot of work. So it was more about like setting the stage for, the upcoming event. So, and it worked really well. But you have to get out there, like way out ahead of it, like 30-degree day, and you bring the guy a Slurpee, right? Like it's just kind of funny.
Yeah,
right? Like we're talking about snow. So,
it's true. It's so important to, do the work at the right time.
Yeah.
And this is the hard part for a lot of business owners, is having the discipline or having a plan to do the right thing at the right time. And like in July, most of your competitors were probably out landscaping.
Yeah.
All of them.
And that made the difference. Like,
yeah.
How did you end up with $100 million snow business? Well, in July, you did the right thing.
Yeah.
Right. And and then you did the right thing every other month of the year, obviously, as well. Yeah. When the shit hits the fan, as you say, you were ready to plow because you did the right thing every month of the year, which is a really powerful takeaway for everybody listening.
I always looked at myself as like the leader in the company, that if I wasn't 6 months ahead of where we were. So when we were in summer, I was working on winter. When we were in winter, I was working on summer. And that was kind of my, mental mantra that I went through. Like, it's hot out, but I got to be wearing a toque.
Yeah.
It's cold out, but I got to walk out in a white t-shirt and go to work. And really that was just an analogy to keep me focused on where, get out of the physical and get into the mental. Mentally, where do I need to be at that time of the year? And it was had nothing to do with seasonality of, the temperatures. It was, where's the seasonality of the business? And really, and I think now even 6 months is hard to do because, with the lag in, supply chain and being able to get equipment and trucks, like that's going to be a big challenge now. How do you pivot quick enough to bring on big contracts? So I think you're going to see the cost of changing for big property owners is going to go up because the risk to change to a new provider is going to go up higher and higher.
For sure.
So you might have to ask for, can I have 3 of the 10? Don't ask for all 10. You got to make sure you can eat the steak.
Well, and it moves so quick too, especially when you're not ready. Like just the seasons in this industry. Right?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Any big questions for the veteran before we wrap up here? What would any tough questions? Give them the hardest one you've got. What's your biggest challenge you're facing right now?
People and systems.
Yeah.
And
specifically, what about people?
Painting the bigger picture, and instilling the drive in people, especially within this industry, I've found it quite difficult.
Yeah.
So one thing that's helped is showing them like the open book model.
Yeah.
Of what our goals are and what success looks like.
Yeah.
But I'm curious how you structured that from the start, and having everyone on your team care and have a fire under their ass. Yeah.
Now, because I came from like this area where I was involved in high level sports. I mean, sometimes I feel like maybe did I cheat, right? Because, I played like junior hockey and college hockey and had access to all kinds of team sports. So I kind of really recruited from there. And, back then we worked with the women's Olympic team, a guy named Wally Kozak. And I said, hey, Wally, some of the girls need to work. And he said, yeah. And so his program was, well, if they pushed the mower all day, they didn't have to do the cardio. They just had to do the weight training. So we had women on the gold medal team. And, I had started the business up, and it was just the end of 1988, the Winter Olympics in Calgary. There's tons of sports teams. And, and then I pulled off hockey teams. I brought in hockey guys. And we had people from the American Hockey League and guys that were playing in Europe and guys that play in the Western Hockey League and all these different leagues. They would come and work. At one time we had, I think it was 56 high-level hockey players, NCAA, guys that were playing pro hockey. They weren't getting paid as much back then. And they're all working there. So
did you have to build a rink out back or what?
Well, it was funny because one time a landscape company unwittingly challenged us to a hockey game. I kept denying it, and then finally we played them. And that's another story. But, things have changed.
Yeah.
Because, kids now and younger people, they're different. We'll just put that, we'll use the word different. It used to be like, well, I play hockey or like high level hockey, but I'm going to work all summer. Now it's like, oh, I have to train and I have a psychologist and I have to go to my stretch class.
Yep. Yeah.
Sports have changed. Everything shifted where it was like, well, if you want to play hockey, you better go work and to buy the hockey equipment or whatever and go work.
Yeah.
Like go out and lift rocks and, cut grass. You'll be in great shape. Don't worry about it. Now, most people can't work at a physical job like that and be involved in high level sports. So it's kind of removed them. Like we still so last year, maybe out of 800 or 900 employees, maybe 12, they were high level athletes.
Right.
But, we wanted more than that, but they just won't do it.
Right.
Now, there's always 12 or a small amount that are crazy enough. And I don't care what coach says or whatever, I'm going to come out and do this. So that's where I was always looking for people that are team people.
So building a high performance culture around high performance people.
Yeah. That's that's why I say I felt like I cheated because I just said, well, here's somebody that was like the captain or assistant captain of their hockey team and they work hard and I know they're involved in teams. So I'm drafting you.
Incredible.
So I should start scouting at the Olympics.
Well, whatever. But and then again after that, I would always look people in the eye and they'd say, "Well, what do you want me to do? I don't understand. Where are we going?" And it was when I talked to, I said, "I just want you to care."
Yeah.
And the day I see that you don't care, we won't even talk about it. I'll just say you need to hand in your jersey.
Yeah.
You're done.
Yeah.
And that was how I pretty well judged everybody on. Do they care? And you can tell really quick when somebody doesn't care. And that person, you might as well just get rid of them. Now, sometimes you have to be a little bit patient because you just can't churn through people. So you need to ask questions like, the one that would get people, especially for mid-level managers, I would go to them and I go, "Are you okay? Got something going on in your life? Like, I'm worried about you." Like from a caring, and they would always go, "Well, what do you mean, Steve? I got no problems." I go, "Well, I just see like you're not into it. You don't seem to be caring about things at work." And you would see their face change immediately to like, he knows.
Yeah.
He can see it in
just acknowledging how people are feeling.
Yeah. And it wouldn't be like, "Well, what do you do?" and get going. It'd be like, "How could I help you?" And they would be, "Oh, no, Steve, I'm fine." And then the next year they were just dialed in.
Yeah.
And it's this subtle stuff, as opposed to coming in and going like, "Why aren't you giving effort? Why are you working hard? Like, what's wrong?"
Yeah.
It's kind of from a different perspective. Like, "Are you okay?" And they ask you, "Well, why would you say that?" And then as soon as you say, "Well, I just see that you're not, performing that well. Is there something I can do?"
Their level of care is usually a reflection of yours.
Yeah.
Right? And so, that's...
So that was kind of my big thing about people. And, I know times have changed, right? But, I think, Charlie, you probably admit that over the last week, I've been able to connect with a lot of people here and had some great conversations. And I would say I have 10 more friends.
Yeah.
And that all comes from caring and asking questions and listening. And I know you're good at that. So you'll do good.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Mark, I do want to hear your first few years. And I'm curious if you don't mind me asking, but the first few years, how you exploded and took off so quick, like 1 million in your first year. What was your biggest takeaway from that you continued to implement as you scaled?
I think I was pretty fortunate in my experience that I had gained doing an apprenticeship in the nuclear industry and also working in construction with my dad, from the age of 12 or so. So my trade skills were pretty good. I had built a few houses and done a lot of landscaping and worked really hard, I think for 10 years or so before I had started the business. So the work ethic part was there and the trade skills were there. Just I was far more interested in trade skills than I was school. I was never very interested in school. I was usually pretty bored sitting in a classroom. So that side of the things, I think, was prepared. And there is that sort of, 10,000 hour rule where you get really good at something if you've spent the time doing it. And at a young age, being 23, my trade skills were exceptional.
Right.
And I also had the good fortune of having a brother that was 10 years older who to this day is definitely the best tradesman I've ever worked with, and I've had thousands of employees. So he was always instrumental in the business and was helping me out for the first few years. Even though he wasn't in the business full time, eventually he did join the business as a partner. But I think the reason it exploded so quickly was my ability to communicate, and more so with customers at the time. My first employees were street kids that I had sort of assembled from just around downtown Toronto, and accidentally I stumbled across a magic recipe. I don't think I understood how magical it was, but those kids had an incredible amount of grit. And I did as well from playing hockey, and I know you played hockey, and your hockey had a lot of grit from hockey, and I had a lot of grit from hard work, just working alongside my father and my brother all those years. So it was a lot of hours. I don't sugarcoat it, and a lot of people try to, and there's no work-life balance in those first few years. I worked 7 days a week. I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I almost never went to bed before midnight. And I just went every single day as hard as I could with the people around me, and they followed me because they could see what I was doing. And those street kids had grit. They had hard lives. And when they showed up, they were willing to get the work done. They were willing to go right to the wall with me every day. When I showed up at 6 o'clock with coffees, they'd laugh and say, well, I guess we're working till 10, right? There was no problem. And that's how we did it, to be honest. I was oftentimes I would disappear in the afternoon. I'd go do sales, and I'd have my shower in the back of my truck with a couple of water bottles, and I'd put different clothes on, and I'd go out and sell jobs, and then I'd be back to the job site, back into my Carhartts, and we'd be working for another 4 or 5 hours. And oftentimes people ask, hey, how did you do $1 million in the first year? And I'd say, well, I just about killed myself doing it, but I had so much fun. Like when I look back, I don't regret anything. I was I was playing the game. And to me, I truly couldn't see the difference between, going and hanging out on a beach or running my business. And I see that in you. I was right where I wanted to be, right where I was meant to be, with the people I was meant to be with. I was truly happy doing that.
And my mom told me something that I was young. She goes, all this stuff about balanced life and everything. She goes, it's a lie.
Yeah.
Like my mom said that. I'm like, well, what does that mean? She goes, when you're doing something, you got to be all in.
Yeah.
And she said, and I had young kids, and she said, don't feel bad about this. You're setting a good work ethic example for them. And she said, if you got to work 6 days a week, then you're all in on it. And then on the one day you take off, make sure you shut off your phone, be all in with your kids.
Yep.
But that's what it takes sometimes. And it's not, different parts of your life are going to give you different ratios of balances to it. So you're building a business, that's what you're doing. You can't half-ass it.
No.
And then maybe as you get a little bit older, like I am, you get a bit more time to spend with kids and family, and you get back then.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I didn't have kids till I was 30. So it was 7 years of going hard like that. And, when I had my first daughter, or my only daughter, but my first kid, I stopped working weekends, and I worked 7 days a week for those first 7 years. And it was a big transition to stop working on the weekends. In fact, I was kind of bored on the weekends. A young baby, there's not that much you can do when they're sleeping half the day, but I just forced myself to stay home, and I forced myself to just change my lifestyle, because I wanted to be as good or better at being a dad than I did at wanting to have a business. And that transition just happens. And I think that was really good advice, Steve, because you will find that, there comes a time where you want to be home at 4 o'clock because your kids are going to be playing soccer. And there's going to be times when you want to take 6 weeks off in the winter to go take an incredible vacation with your family. But in those early years, particularly starting at your age and being so passionate about it, if you truly love the game and you see it as just one life, I've often referred to it as one life. If you feel like you're right at home in your life, then it's not really work. And as long as it doesn't feel like work, there's no limit to the number of hours you can put into it when you're young. And I think there's too many young people today that are looking to find this this hack on Instagram where, you know, I can live on a beach and work 2 hours a day and become a millionaire. And I think that stuff's possible, but I don't think that stuff's fulfilling. I think when you build something and you learn how to build it and you see the impact that it has on the community you serve and the people you work for, and you see the impact that it has on the lives of the people around you, you can truly build happiness there. You know, sitting on a beach and making invisible money, it sounds good, but those people have a hard time finding happiness because there's no purpose to that work.
Yeah.
Well, and when it ends, they have none of the tangible skills that you gain, whether you win or lose in an industry like this. It's what you build. You were talking about different identities, and you mentioned a few things throughout the week of like how focusing on yourself, your family, and the business is really important to you at this stage. When did that like change happen, or the switch flip from going all in to not taking a step back, but spreading your time out a little bit more? Was it when your daughter was born, or when?
Yeah, so I went through a strange transition, I would say, as the company evolved, and it was almost like in 5-year blocks, and so, you know, roughly. Yeah. And so that the early years, as I said, I was just so passionate. I was happy all the time doing what I was doing. And then as the company was growing and as my family life was evolving, I lost focus on myself. And so I think in those early years, I was playing the game and enjoying it so much that I didn't really think about myself. I just lived from within, and we all experience our lives from within. And so I was super happy with where I was and who I was with. But then as the business started to grow, as a result of the greatness of the people that were in the company, we were attracting more and more people into the business. And, you know, as you do that at a larger scale, you let some bad energy into your business, right? Like after a while, you look around and it's not quite what it was. And so I wasn't enjoying the business like I did in the first 7 to 10 years as I started to get on. And what started to happen for me is I was growing the business to continue to create opportunity for other people, which I do believe in. But when you start to grow the business too quickly and you keep letting the wrong customers in and you keep letting the wrong people in, you're not enjoying it the same way. So it starts to feel more like work. And so when there's a lot of work happening and it doesn't feel as good as it should, that's when I think you really do need to focus on yourself more. And for me, it took me a few years to figure this out. And so I lived, I think, in a world where I was trying to optimize myself as a leader to overcome a problem that I wasn't as passionate about solving as I was before. And so there was this loneliness there where I couldn't really understand why I wasn't passionate about the work, and I couldn't explain it. And when you're not focused on yourself and you're not living your authentic life, I think what happens is you're always reflecting and saying, like, what's wrong with me? Why don't I feel happy? Instead of just really learning to stay focused on yourself and find what makes you happy and then design a business and a life around what makes you happy. And I think what I started to do is focus too externally and just like building a business, not seeing it as being part of one life or an integrated life. And I think as I got a little bit older and I spent more time really truly focusing on myself, I realized that I had stepped out of what really meant everything to me. And I started to grow for the sake of growing, to feed debt, to feed people that weren't meant to be in my life. And so your circle of influence really does dictate your opportunity to be happy and then your opportunity to unlock your true potential. And for me, I think over the years, I wasn't mindful enough of that because I wasn't thinking of myself first. And as I've matured a little bit and learned from others, now I focus on myself first, and I'm really, really selective about the people who I let inside of my circle of influence. And by doing that, my level of happiness is always maintained at a high level. And if I find people in my life who I can't find happiness with, then I gracefully choose to see them out of my day-to-day. And that has made all the difference. And so the people that I get to spend my time with these days are my fuel. And I don't financials are just a measurement to me.
Yeah.
It's to me, it's if I'm happy with the people that I get to share my life with, and I say get to share my life with, then business results will be amazing. My personal results will be amazing. I'm going to feel good. And ultimately, I'm going to experience this life from within. And that's all that really matters at the end of the day, is optimizing that.
And you can feel it, Charlie. Like, you can just ask yourself, like, when I interface with this person, does it energize me? Is the person here to help? Or is the person here to hinder, and do they pull energy away from me? And when you're like interfacing with hundreds of people and 50 are pulling away energy and 50 are giving you energy, you end up neutral. You got a proton and a neutron, and you put them together, and there it just sits there. But what happens if you take away the 50 negative and now you got 50 positive? It feels like addictive. Like, it's a great feeling.
That's an incredible summary.
Right. And then you go, why don't I keep adding on more pluses?
Yeah.
Right. So at the start, the easiest thing, like Mark said, is to take away the negatives, because it's hard to find pluses. Yeah. But if you're hanging out with 25 negatives already, it's just like, cutting costs is the easiest way to make the bottom line go up. And I'll tell you, the best way to live a great life is get rid of negatives.
Right. Well, and surround yourself with the right people is so important. Like you mentioned, like it's all a perspective shift. Like if you're doing the best of who you're in the room with, you think you're great. Like, you're really nothing. No, that's been so cool this week. Like just all these successful guys.
Do you feel in your place between us two? Like knocked you down a peg?
Yes, it's awesome. It's good. I want to ask you. You've done quite a lot with vertical integration within your organizations, and I want you, like, if you don't mind speaking on the importance of that, how it's helped the success of doing quite a bit in-house or under your own name.
I like to self-perform most of the work. There were times throughout my career where I felt that we weren't ready to self-perform, and we'd use some subcontractors, or obviously we'd buy materials that I thought we could probably get better deals on by going direct and things like that. But I always found, like, as scale happens, vertical integration should follow. And so early on it was trades. I would, if we were doing enough work with stonemasons, then it was time for us to have our own stonemasons. And then if we were doing enough work with carpenters, it was time to bring on carpenters. If we were doing enough electrical, it was time to bring on electricians. And so I was a really big fan of having building trades on staff as opposed to trying to hire landscapers. And so very much, our whole hiring process was designed to bring on building trades. And so that built this incredible level of skill in the company that allowed us to really sort of grow a lot faster, because we could take on more complex projects. We could take on larger scaled projects without having to micromanage the field talent. And so on that component, I really focused. And then as the business started to get to scale, then I started to focus on vertical integration on material management, which was more like bulk buying salt in the winter, stone suppliers from all over the world in the summer. Eventually, we had our own gravel pits, mulch manufacturing, topsoil screening, nurseries. And as I built all those things out, I built them when we needed them. And when the business was doing enough revenue in any of those areas, or had enough of an expense in any of those areas to justify it. And so it was always a financial decision. Sometimes I think I moved too fast into a few things along the way. At one point, I decided to buy a blower truck because the blower truck guys couldn't keep up to our demand. And so it was more of a supply and demand thing, but it was a hard lesson. I spent $500,000 on equipment, and we didn't have the expertise in-house to make that actually happen. And it turns out you can't make money with one blower truck, and you can't be productive with one blower truck. And I should have known better, because we were hiring blower trucks and they'd show up with 2 or 3, and then they'd be feeding them with slinger trucks on site. And I didn't have that equipment, but I went out and bought 1 truck.
Right.
And now at this point, I'm a business owner with 40 crews. The likelihood of me rolling up my sleeves and systemizing that is pretty low. And so we were in and out of that business within 2 or 3 years. And when I looked at it, I had lost a couple $100,000 because I had an entrepreneurial seizure one day.
Yeah.
You know?
And when you vertically integrate, you have to remember, Charlie, like if you're subcontracting these guys and now you say, hey, I'm going to do it. These guys have been there for you for a lot of years, worked with you. You've got a good relationship. As soon as you say, look, I'm going to take away all this work from you and I'm going to do it myself, their opinion of you shifts a little bit. Yeah. They're like, Mark or Steve, you're getting greedy. Like, you know, what about, the $500,000 worth of work you give me every year? And I've been here for you for 8 years or whatever. So it's a big decision when you start to vertically integrate, because you're stepping into somebody else's pasture, right?
Yeah.
So those are things that you have to think about. And if you are going to do that, then, at least look them in the eye and take them out for dinner and say thank you, and try to leave on good terms, because you might find out that it's not as easy as you thought.
Right.
Most times you find that out. It seems like their business is easy because they work so hard at it to make it look that way.
Right.
But when you jump into their business, it's not always so easy. So those are wise words. Be careful what you wish for. It's and that's why I'm such a fan of focus. I think happiness should really lead your business more than the financial outcomes. And when you focus on happiness, it's easier to stay focused. Focus on happiness, and you'll stay focused. It's kind of a funny statement, but in my experience, when I started to focus on money, I would always get out of focus, and I'd always end up paying the price in the end, because anytime I went to work for money, misery was waiting for me. Anytime I went to work for happiness was waiting for me.
Wow.
We'll end on that note.
Thank
you guys for joining.
Awesome.
I really appreciate you guys taking part here today. There's so much for our audience to learn. All right.
Be fun following this guy.
All right.
Awesome.